how to get your first B2B customers. And this is going to be at the lens of SaaS, so startups that are building a tech platform, not necessarily your first consulting customer, but a lot of these things will apply as well. So if you have any questions, submit yours in the chat, whether you're on LinkedIn Live or YouTube, or after today, shoot me an email directly and would be happy to chat. Again, I'm Andrew Vermancourt, the partner and CEO at Headway, and spent a lot of my time building B2B SaaS startups prior to Headway and also through the consulting that we do. So I'm excited to share some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. So what is a customer? A person or organization that buys goods or services from a store or business. So in the early stage world where you're launching a product, you don't have customers until they give you money and you exchange something of value or a promise of something of value to them over time. And so a lot of what we're talking about is how to go from potential prospects and folks that are interested in what you offer to actually getting people who are going to say yes. Once they become customers, how do you learn from them in a way that is methodical, that's repeatable, that follows a system so that you can figure out how to adjust your product over time. So the biggest part in getting customers is like defining the strategy. And so when we talk about strategy, there's a lot of things that go through people's heads. Some people think of whiteboarding. Some people think of, using sticky notes, doing a workshop, exploring all the different opportunities. But at the end of the day, strategy is just a plan of action. So like, what's your plan of action? And if you're familiar with Alex Hormozi, I'll talk about his books right after this, but he says it this way, which I think is really important and distills it down away from all the fluff of strategic frameworks and thinking and design thinking and all these things of like, strategy is just about prioritizing where you'll get the most bang for your buck with the realization that you can't allocate finite resources against infinite options. So you have to choose what's actually going to move the needle for your time, for your money, and the strategy is at the core of that. And so the two books, so $100 million Offers was the first one. Volume 2 just came out, $100 million Leads, and we're going to talk about some things that I think he distills really well here when you think about where and how to get customers. And so if you haven't read these, would definitely recommend them. He has free courses that go with both of these on acquisition.com. And so the next question is, what tactics give us the most results with the least amount of effort? Assuming that if you're in a startup, you're constrained by money, you're constrained by time, you're also constrained probably by promises if you have investors. Like, what's the progress you told them you were going to make? And you're trying to figure out what's going to move. So there's two things that Alex breaks down. There's really 8 different ways to get customers. And this first one is all focused on you. So like warm outreach. So a lot of times when we talk about founder market fit, it's about starting a business in a market you know a lot about that you could do some warm outreach to. It's going to be the number one most effective way for you to get clients is being able to pick up the phone or look, in your contacts and say, who could be a client of this? Who could I get feedback from? Who would be an early adopter? Next thing is cold outreach. So who are lookalike people that are in those markets that we're selling to that we're going to have to do some outreach on? And usually that outreach is a lot more effective if you have success stories, if you can get some of those people in your network to be logos or testimonials or case studies. To do cold outreach without any proof, not impossible, but takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of will to keep going. The other way there, or things that you can do, is creating content, sharing your model, creating something organic that attracts people. A lot of people think of this about inbound. The last one is like pay to play. So paying for ads that place you in places where you think your customers are, and you try to hook them through messaging, through visuals, things like that. The other 4 is like selling through other people. So referrals. So using people in your network, again, back to warm outreach. If you know people that are your target customer, they can likely refer you to people that they know through, peer groups, through SME groups, things like that. People in their position at other companies, which is really important because then you can get more at bats to try and get customers. The other way is through affiliates. So if you, there's actually a company called Afori. Am I saying that correctly? They were co-working here in Headway. They're in an accelerator in Austin now. And they went and they sold affiliate through AppSumo, and they sold, I think I just saw over 200,000 in 30 days. And so they're using their affiliate program to get customers. A little bit further along, they have a product. They've had customers already they've been learning from, but really help them to scale that offer. The other one, employees. So getting folks to, connect with their networks, kind of like referrals. Same thing with agencies here, like really developing other channels for you to be able to distribute your message, get your offer in front of other people or your business in front of other people. Any questions on those 8?
I mean, they seem sequential, but I didn't know if...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he recommends an approach. I think that's the way it kind of shook out. That's how I would probably approach it. Or maybe even warm outreach and then create content, something that's compelling, and then be able to do cold outreach with that content.
Got it.
Right. And we even did this year for Headway, where we're creating reports on a specific market, and we're asking somebody, hey, we're creating a report. Are you interested in getting it after? We're going to ask you a couple of questions to be a part of it. Yes. Right. So then you start to develop those warm relationships with people. You can deliver that content later. But probably the last thing you should do is paid ads. If nothing else works, then you should do paid ads, because you're not really sure if any of your conversation is resonating, if your landing page is resonating, if your product works. Everybody's going to follow through that funnel, right? And we'll talk about measuring a little bit later, but paid ads are the most expensive monetary way to do it. If you have a lot of money and that's not your constraint, you could probably start with that. If you have very little capital or limited capital, paid ads are probably something that you want to avoid until you have some wins, so you can have those be more effective. All right, so a lot of that is kind of leading into what we call pilot programs here, where essentially we're trying to get people that are in network. And as I mentioned, this is critical for you to have founder market fit, meaning you understand the market, 5, 10, 15 people you could reach out to be able to convince them to give you a shot, right? Even if you have friends and family, if they don't see any value in what you're doing, hey, great idea, I'll see if I can connect you with somebody, right? They'll kind of hand wave it around. And so getting to those pilot programs is really important, where it's essentially, I'll walk through a couple of the pros and cons here, but essentially what you're trying to do is learn as much as possible from your first customers. Like the revenue that they give you is valuable in the way that it helps you learn, but it's not actually what's going to move your business forward. It's the learning that's going to help you hone your solution and everything else beyond that. And so going into pilot programs, a lot of the benefits are like capturing those motivated early adopters. You can do a lot of free ads and things on like Product Hunt, on Early Bird. They don't always convert great, especially for B2B, but you can capture a lot of motivated folks that are in network. Again, develop a deep empathy for the problem. So making sure that you're getting out of your own head and the way that you're thinking about defining the problem, or the way that you've defined it, and try to understand what else is happening in the greater ecosystem of your target audience. And then you can learn what aspects of your current solution hits or misses the mark. And so basically, like by making sure that you're bringing people in as early adopters, you're trying to measure both what they say they were going to do, what's important to them, and then also how they actually use your product and get usage data. The other benefit there is converting pilots into long-term customers and evangelists. So taking those early wins, communicating them with a roadmap, iterating really closely with them, they'll develop a deep appreciation for your team and what you're doing, and will likely be much more loyal as you deliver on those promises. And for that, as I mentioned, informing your roadmap, your investment case, and ultimately your market opportunity. Any questions on benefits? Is everyone familiar with pilot programs? Early customers, I'm sure, but and one thing I wanted to call out here, this is really important, is product-led growth for sales-led growth pilot programs right away. So we use the pirate model of engagement metrics, which is acquisition, activation, referral, retention, and revenue. And it's just a way to think about, I don't know if this is going to work on the screen. Good way to think about the overall experience and like, how do you acquire a customer's interest? How do you acquire information about them so you can go follow up? So that's an email, that's contact information, things that you can try and convince them to be a customer, have a conversation with them. The other one is activation. So we don't actually, if someone were to create an account on a platform we built, we don't consider them activated. We would create rules for activation. So basically, if you're, let's say you're I'm trying to think of a good example here. if you are a B2B platform, let's even say Figma, which is a design tool, you wouldn't consider someone to be fully activated if they created an account, because they'd probably have high churn risk, meaning they wouldn't be a customer for long if you only had one person on a team account. So what they would try to do is convince you to invite other people, and they would define some rules for them to reach initial activation, and there's probably tiers, but that activation is really an indicator of whether or not they're going to get value from you, and it really bleeds into these other ones, which are referrals. Like, are those people going to tell other people about you? Have they received enough value to say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put my neck out on the line and recommend this to somebody else? Retention is, are they going to continue using it? Are they going to continue paying for it? Which really goes into revenue and lifetime value. And so really what we've seen is, like, if you jump straight to a product-led growth pilot model, you're going to see a lot of interest. And you see this a lot with, if you just were to do product hunt, or you just were to do like early sites, is that you get a lot of interest and no one that's truly activated. And so you can't really learn that much as things trickle down here. One, you're not actually making enough revenue to keep going. And two, you're not getting enough learning because nobody's actually getting the value from your platform that they thought they were going to get, because they're not activated. And so what we usually recommend is, here's a good point. Like, analytics and product metrics tell us what's happening. So this is a good view of that. But then the conversations that come through a sales-led growth model help us learn quicker and reduce risk and deliver value sooner. So by pairing product analytics with customer interviews, customer conversations in a consistent way, you can actually make sure that you're delivering value. And if you're not, you can figure out how to adjust that. If you're in this PLG model where they don't have a face, they don't have an account rep, they've never talked to you, it's going to be very hard for you to get, behind the veil of what's happening with them and why they're not getting value, and then be able to overcome that. So we always recommend starting off with a sales-led growth model, meaning founder selling, essentially. So then with some pilot program rules of thumb, we never run free pilots. That means, like, unless you have a lot of funding, a lot of revenue, and not many constraints, it's going to be very hard to learn enough from like the freemium model, or giving someone something for free, even if they're a friendly, right? Even if they're warm, giving it to them for free, kind of a saying is like, free pilots get you cheap feedback. And that means you're not actually going to learn why they would keep using it or why they wouldn't, because they'll just use the excuse of like, well, ended up changing priorities, and they have no skin in the game to activate. And that's really what you want, is try to get them to that level of activation where they're now bought in, they're now actively investing their time because they went through all the hoops to get it implemented into their team and whatnot. The other thing here is, like, never send new information over email, text, or PDF. And this is a little bit into just kind of some sales strategy, but has anyone here ever gotten new email over, like, try to be sold something and got like a price sheet or something over email that you didn't know before, and you just like went to the price and you made an instant decision on whether or not you were going to use it? I have a lot. But I think, like, at Headway specifically, we also stopped doing this in the early days of Headway in like 2016. We just send over, PDFs over email. We wouldn't hear anything. They wouldn't understand really how we're going to help them, because people just flip to the end. So I think the same thing is true with your pilot program, and with your really anything inside of that sales, is like, present it to somebody, understand the objections so you can overcome them, and then you can start building up a backlog of content ideas that address those objections. The other one here is never end a meeting without booking the next meeting. So as you're trying to get customers, never let them say, oh, well, let me talk internally and I'll get back to you. If they say that, like, oh, great, like, what's a good amount of time for us to be able to regroup? Does next Friday work? Just to have a bookend in our calendar, make sure that we have a touch point. I can answer any questions you have then. If you don't do that, they're going to essentially go away. They probably won't have the conversation, even if it's a priority for them with everything else going on. And you'll either forget to follow up, or you'll try to follow up again, get something on the calendar. Sometimes if people aren't interested, they'll just cancel, right? They'll just say, yeah, hey, we decided not to do it. Great. Then at least you know who is going to move forward in your pipeline and who's not going to. Then you can change, kind of what you do. The other thing here is, like, as you're developing your process for selling customers, like going slow and making sure you have all the data is really important. If you don't truly understand someone's current state, like what challenges they're facing today, what it means to their business, how that fits in to the greater scheme of it, it's going to be hard when you get in front of them to present a business case that is relevant to what they're doing. And so, I've had many times at startups and also at Headway where people are like, hey, we want to get started. Great. Here's the pricing. Well, next week we're going to schedule the pitch, and you get to there, you don't really understand the current environment that they're coming from. And so you're delivering that, and you're not delivering it in the context of what transformation that's going to have for their business or what sort of outcomes those are going to lead to, because you don't understand like where are they now, where are they trying to go. So making sure that you don't skip parts of the process, even when people say we want to move really fast. You just try to figure out how to do those. Well, great, we can set up a meeting tomorrow, and then in 2 days we'll go ahead and present you the pilot program. The other thing that kind of goes with the product-led growth is like, don't expect customers to self-onboard, activate, and then retain, meaning like stay on the platform. I think this is the number one thing that SaaS companies fall into. People that we work with, people in the broader market, is that they see all these big companies with $50 million that they've raised, and they're really pouring a lot of money into marketing, that they want to be just like them. Hey, we're going to send them a link. We're going to sign up for a wait list. They're ultimately just going to onboard themselves and be successful. That's very rare. You want to take the learnings from your conversations and from your interviews and figure out how to get to that point. But usually early on when you're running these pilots, your customers aren't always going to look the same, right? So you'll have a customer, let's say, who has 50 people who are going to join the platform. You have one who has 3 people. Those data problems are different, like the volume of data, the importance of the business, those are all different. And so trying to understand what different customers look like will help you figure out, okay, what's the minimum path for folks to onboard later on when you get there. The other thing there is just measuring everything. So goes in with, the product-led and sales-led growth is like learning what's happening. So making sure you have the right telemetrics in place, and then having those conversations with customers, learning why they're not using it or why it's so difficult or what the friction is on their team. So the other thing to kind of hop to is like your first 5 pilots. Kind of mentioned this in warm, but start in network, right? And as you're having those conversations, this kind of builds upon like combining the warm with referrals. Is like, ask who else do you know? That could be in the same company. If it's a large company, that could be a different district, depends who you're selling to, but always be trying to see if people will pay you with their reputation. So even if they say, oh, it's not good for us, you say, well, who else do you know is like struggling with this? Oh, well, this company or that company. And if they don't think your solution is a good fit for that role or for who you're selling into, they'll probably say, well, yeah, I'll have to think about that and I'll get back to you, because they don't want to put their reputation on the line. So there's like a currency ladder of time. Will they take a meeting with you? Great. Reputation is really the next ladder on that. Will they recommend you to other people, even if they're not a customer? And then money. And you always try to get, to that money. The other thing here for your pilots here is limiting to 3 to 5 customers. So being able to balance that scarcity and urgency, and then understanding that with those customers, you can provide such a great level of support that you can do meetings with them every week. You can figure out how that adjusts on your roadmap. You can increase the value for them, which ultimately will help you build a better product, rather than saying, we're going to get 50 customers tomorrow. It's like, it's probably better to limit 3 to 5 for 2-3 months and really iterate closely with them than try to, onboard a ton of customers, even if there's a lot of interest. Even if you have like, I guess, what would you call it? Like product message fit, where on your website, you have a high conversion rate and a lot of people are interested. You haven't really served them yet. So just like in that paid ad scenario, if you let everybody in and you haven't fixed the product to the point where it's actually delivering value, they'll just drop out and they won't think about another opportunity to serve or to try it out later down the road. The thing here is like, don't try to hide that the product is new and just getting started. Use it as a benefit. Use it as something that you can try and really get buy-in from people, that you're going to be focused on what they need. They have the opportunity to shape it. They're not going to go ahead and expect you to be polished like every other company out there. So there is a little bit of damage control you have to do here with these early products, in the sense that like you want to limit and limit the risk. So you don't want somebody to say, yeah, we're in. Like, let's say Nicolay Bank, they wanted to be in on something. You wouldn't invite their entire company and say, all right, great, and they're your first customer and expect that to go well. There's going to be rough edges that you're going to have to hone, regardless of how focused you were on testing or QA. We're really focusing on, hey, it's new, you get to shape it. We're going to meet with you and you get to actually help determine what the roadmap looks like. The other thing here is, rather than thinking of your startup as all-in-one, a full tech solution, is focusing on providing a tech-enabled service. So rather than thinking of like, well, we have to have automated invoicing, we have to have automated account creation, we have to have all these things in our product in order for it to launch, usually you can get by saying, especially with sales-led growth, by being able to invoice them outside. You can send a QuickBooks invoice, you could send a Stripe invoice, you can create an account on the back end, you can have developers do that. If you're doing it in a controlled environment, you can still do all the things you need to do, but really where you're going to focus your time and resources is on that core product and that core value. And then the other one here is just setting up regular cadence and commitments for both parties. So you want to make sure that, especially with, you not hiding that the product's new, you having limited customers, they actually meet with you. The biggest thing that I see that goes wrong with pilot programs is people sign them up and then they don't actually meet with clients. They review maybe the metrics every couple of weeks and say, well, they're not really using it. I'll shoot an email, I'll see how they're doing. Set those up in advance and set that expectation that you're going to be meeting with them every 2 weeks for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever that might be. And part of that is to make the product better. Any questions so far on into some of that stuff?
Do you discount the pilot program? You said never run free pilots. So is it always at...
You could run early price. Hey, we have we have a pilot price. I think that it depends on the context of what you're doing. I mean, I think it'd be very hard for you to charge market rate with a sub-market experience. So it's like trying to find that balance between where are they coming from, and one thing we didn't talk about is like how to establish a price, right? And some of that's going to come from your customers like, well, in your early conversations is like, what are they going to compare it to? If your product's being compared to Notion or Slack, that's like $5 a month, and you're trying to charge $100 a month, there's a big discrepancy in either how you're presenting it or what they see as differentiators or where they see the value. So I think one, never free, but two, and is kind of the answer, but probably it's pretty common for B2B and B2C things we run basically like not a percentage off. So someone expects a lower price, but buy 3 months, get 3 months free. So there's an incentive. So rather than saying 50% off, they get used to the full price, but they know that 3 of the months are free. And so you're signing them up for the actual price they would expect to pay later. You're just giving them a benefit of more time. Good question. Any others? All right. Cool. So pilot sales, a big part of this is understanding what today looks like. I'm not going to go into a lot of sales theory and practice when it comes to qualifying people and running discovery calls and things like that, but just understanding what today looks like is really important. What are they currently facing? What are the things that they've tried before? What's the overall picture of today? And then make sure you get a benchmark. Like if you're going to measure success and somebody's going to continue on based on how you can deliver in this pilot program, what benchmarks, tools, processes, current state can you establish? Some of that could be quantitative, like what are the actual numbers? Some of that could be qualitative. How is their team feeling with the current way? So then when you think about updating your website with success stories of this pilot program, you can, put current or old state, new state together. It's like they went from this to this. What's the transition? And then set metrics for success against benchmarks and absolutes, meaning estimated change. Like that's probably a good relative benchmark. So, hey, we're going to bump your landing page performance from, 26% conversion to 32. And then also an absolute, meaning, what's the actual number that kind of ties in. So a relative and an absolute that you're kind of going for. Set the right expectations, right? We talked about that a little bit. Setting expectations with customers where you're going to go over the moon for them and you can't. You're not going to be successful. You're going to lose that customer. You're not going to get the opportunity to keep serving them. And then a big part here is just guiding the process. So sharing implementation timelines and next steps. I think a big part that I've seen people struggle with is not driving the process and losing control. So if you think back to the never send new information over email, that comes from a sense of controlling the process and clarity whether or not this person's actually interested and whether or not they're a prospect. And so when you can guide the process through sharing information, through sharing implementation timelines, you get them to give you an opportunity to opt into that or say, hey, that's not going to work for us. To get through procurement, we need 4 weeks. Great. Now you know when you're building your financial timeline and your pipeline, you can expect that revenue to hit for X amount of time, right? You're getting clarity about that process and usually guiding that, sharing the implementation timelines will do that. And so here's an example of a implementation process that we made a while back. Let me see if I can scroll. So basically hey, we have this implementation timeline that takes us 2 weeks. Who's involved from the team? You list out everybody that they need. And some of this is going to come from your problem discovery early on. So if you don't understand what it takes to implement a solution like yours in an enterprise, or this is a healthcare system as an example, you're going to struggle. And you'll have to figure that out. And so you'll have to go through that process, learning about what does it take a customer to implement. And then you'll have to create this implementation process. But having it in place is really important because then you give them, like I said, the opportunity to opt in. And so being able to say setup fees, who's involved, what days do we need, what legal information are we delivering, everything that really gives them a bird's eye view of, okay, how do we get started? And a lot of objections that happen end up coming up in business and legal information. The worst thing that you can do is say, hey, we won this big customer, and you get drip fed all the requirements from their team. Hey, well, we need a W-9. And then 2 weeks later, well, I talked to procurement and we need this SOC 2 report. And it just draws out and adds more risk to your business, where that sales cycle length and that closing cycle length is going to impact your ability to deliver going forward. So the more that you can estimate that, the better. I guess one tactic that I would use if you're trying to sell into a company and you don't understand the procurement process is see if there's an advisor, a connection, somebody who's been familiar with that, or not a competitor product, but a lookalike product that is maybe doing something different. See if you can book a call with them. Hey, we're trying to sell into that. What do you know? And just be resourceful to try and get as much intel as possible. Yeah, so the question is, how can one establish a price for a test pilot and then be able to increase the price as the product improves with the least amount of friction? That's a good question. I think the biggest thing there is understanding what the current market is. I saw a stat, and I want to quote it, but I don't remember it, but 60% or so of all B2B software loses to a spreadsheet, meaning they don't actually see enough value in what you're doing opposed to the free spreadsheets they already have, right? And some of that's customizability. Some of that is they want to control the process. Some of that, but I think a big part of that is messaging and then positioning of who are you right? And so when you think about those test pilots in discovery calls, problem discovery, what we would do is, I guess kind of problem and solution discovery. So we haven't built it yet. We're not actually trying to sell them. We're just trying to do research. We would try to take them through a landing page, do a perception test. What do you think the product does? What do you think about it? Where do you think this fits? See if they come up with any other comparisons. Oh, it's kind of like this product that we use. Then you can go to it and see, okay, what's their pricing? But then you show them the solution, and then you ask them, now that you see this, what do you think something like this is valued at? Well, and that's kind of the example I gave some people. If they're saying, well, it's just like Notion, but it's for healthcare. It's are you comparing it to Notion for healthcare, and you're just going to value it at Notion but HIPAA compliant? How does that work out? But in that process, you'll get a lot of different pricing You can also go out and see what competitors are charging. You could try to value price as well. I think pricing is both an art and a science. Like value pricing would be, well, if we, like sales is usually value price, like 10% of a sale, right? That's based on the value that they're going to deliver to you. But they also might try to say, hey, your average deal is 100K. So each deal we bring in, we expect to be paid 10K. And so there's some benchmarks there, and there's some pricing that can go into it. One thing that I know we've talked about a lot on the channel and other places is willingness to pay. So I always get confused with where they're at. Paddle Bottom, but Price Intelligently and Profit Well, they came out with a willingness to pay guide on how to run willingness to pay with your customers. So establish a price where they're paying for it, where you can deliver on it. And if you never increase prices on them, you would be happy with those 5 customers to stay. But the willingness to pay study is all about trying to understand relative. Like if you, how much would be too much where product X would be considered too expensive? How much would be too low where you would question its, fidelity or question its security? And you try to take some of that quantitative data and put it together. Yeah, thank you, Jacob. We posted that there. So those are some good things. I mean, there's no set process there. I think it's like making sure you're getting the right data from customers, from people in your market, and then pricing on that versus just throwing out a blanket price. You could. You're going to spend a lot of time trying to learn if that's right or not if you don't have a comparison, because what your customers are going to do is say, is this better than a spreadsheet? Yes. Okay. What else is out there is usually like very rare for somebody to get presented an opportunity and say, yeah, we're going to do it. Well, we have to do some sort of study and we have to go look here. And even though it's a pilot program, you get a lot of these head nods. And so your customers will do their research in 90% of the cases. In 10% where somebody is like the judge, jury, and executioner, they might say, sounds good. Like, let's get started. But that's usually rare. Hopefully that was helpful. Is that it? Yeah. Any in here? No? Cool. So let's talk about ongoing call structure. So once you have a customer, how do you make sure you're learning the most from them to then inform product roadmap? And ultimately, like, how do you talk about the product value as you're providing it? So ongoing call structure, this is just a recommendation for, first 5 minutes, build rapport, catch up. Like ultimately, businesses are run by humans. Make sure you understand, who you're talking to and you're just kind of building that relationship. Then 5 minutes, like review the latest metrics and feedback. Obviously, if you don't have any metrics, you don't have any feedback, you really harp there of like, hey, no one's using it. What can we do? How can we help? Should we create another call? Should we walk them through a demo? Who can we activate? Who can we set on one-on-ones with? And you're really trying to overcome all that friction. So this is a good example of, if somebody signed up product-led growth and somebody else got invited, let's say you had an account rep who made the call for you to get implemented. They invited someone else. They never accepted the invite. The deal would die, right? You wouldn't get them to renew. You wouldn't have anything to really stand on. So in this scenario, if you don't have any performance metrics, meaning they haven't used it yet, and you don't have any feedback, offer to get on a one-on-one call with that person, offer to walk through with them and try to overcome the friction where they're like, ultimately they're not believing they're going to get value out of it. So how can you address that concern? And then here's a model that we go through for every customer. Like it's understanding where they're starting from, their current state, and then what's the promise? Like what's ultimately the outcome that they're trying to get to? And when you can land a customer, get them to that outcome, you can be really successful and, retain customers, continue to grow your business, that sort of thing. And so we plot them on a journey and would recommend that everybody does kind of in-app testing here where you have onboarding, you have providing the core value, and then you have ongoing support. And so each one of these steps in the process is like, we're trying to assume that customer will register with their email. They'll create a profile. They'll create their first project. So making sure that you're measuring their progress throughout the platform is going to help you understand where is it breaking down. And ultimately, when you get them to an activation moment, and we kind of called it a magic moment here, you're actually providing the value. The rest of it is them just giving you information in order for them to be able to get access to an account, to be able to do something with their data. And so you can see here, like it's red, like they're not actually getting value out of it. And each of your customers are going to be different, right? So a customer that is a team of one, they might get in the bottom here where they are actually into the product, starting to get value. If you have, a team that's 50 people, like this middle one, they've probably adopted 20 different softwares as a group for the last, over the last year. They're probably very hesitant to actually onboard and be effective. And so you're going to need to work on them, and you have to kind of answer the question is like, as we spend our limited resources, our limited time, who are the best customers for our product? Who are the ones that are actually going to activate and get value? Because that's, the biggest reason why companies fail is like people don't actually onboard and they don't actually get the value. And so they try to iterate upstream on things that activate customers, but they don't work on the core product or eliminating customers that aren't the right fit, right? Like are you trying to serve enterprise or not? Are you trying to serve SMBs or, and you kind of have to decide with the product because the product can't change in most cases, or it's prohibitive for it to change until AI takes over and, just read everyone's mind. So with that, you're identifying those key areas to support and improve. So once you have those metrics, you're able to have conversations with them. You're able to have conversations internally around what features on the roadmap are going to be effective. It might be like, we're going to lower the barrier to what it takes to onboard. We're going to take a report out from the client, and we're going to do the manual work to get their data in there. Things like that will help you drive what changes on the roadmap. Without it, you see this a lot. It's like everybody has an opinion about what they need to build. Nobody really knows. They don't have any data points. And so you build all of it because no one wants to hurt someone's feelings, or the CEO decides. The other thing you can do is share upcoming improvements and releases, like teasing that continuation when you're creating, those pilot programs. Like, here's what's coming up. Hey, we heard you, and this is what the team's working on. And you can also, we'll do this a lot with our design and research team, where we'll share upcoming prototypes of things that aren't on the roadmap yet to help them shape it as well and get their feedback before we go to build it. And then the next 5 minutes is closing, next steps, and just scheduling deep dives if needed. That could be one-on-ones. That could be, whatever's needed to try and reduce the friction as you keep going. So questions, comments, confusion? Yeah.
How much of a product do you recommend having built out in order to do like the warm outreach or this process?
Good question. We usually do it with just clickable prototype in Figma to try and get early adopters to sign up into a pilot program that could be coming later. But I would say like trying to understand and draw a line in the sand of like so one, it's kind of predicated on you really understanding your customers and what they value. But like, if you can deliver just that, what else can you support? Back to like a tech-enabled business, what else could you support with manual effort to get them that core value? And they're just going to pay for that, right? So a lot of times, I feel like founders, I'm not saying you specifically, like founders want it to be automated. We want it to be like, well, the whole product's polished. Like, trying to think of an example here. Instagram, you couldn't even upload images on the web until like 2 years ago. And they got bought for $1 billion. And every founder's like, well, we got to have parity on mobile and web. It's like, you have to understand the context of your customers and really what they value. And so I think like the least amount possible, because that'll limit what you waste time on, right? I think I see that more oftentimes than not, that a lot of people will build out everything and then use 40% of it. And they spent months building a bunch of other stuff that's not core to their value, the value proposition that they have, and like could have been done a different way with a few hours at time.
Long is a typical pilot program, and I'm sure it varies, but like throughout that, what does the typical journey look like? Is it, call every month, call every week, depend on the product, all that?
Yeah, I would recommend at the very least every 2 weeks you're having a call with somebody for 30 minutes, something like this. If it's a product that's used daily, every week might be effective, right? So where you're deploying it inside of a small team in a company, let's say 10 people, they're using it every day, you're getting lots of feedback, you're trying to, really provide a concierge experience, which goes back to limiting that pilot program to be smaller. So one, you have the time and attention to do it. And two, you can actually figure out how to process that feedback into roadmap. I would always recommend that pilot programs, I mean, it depends on structure. I know you guys are doing like software and services. So it depends, right? But if you're like just straight SaaS, I'd probably recommend, if a month is enough for them to be truly activated, they can make a decision there. And so also depends on how quick your product's going to deliver. So back to the metrics that we talked about, here, like setting metrics for success against benchmarks is like, what changes they need to see to move forward. So you're kind of, what I would recommend is like putting those into a contract where you say, here's current state, here's our goal. And then you almost have an automatic where it goes from a 3-month pilot to, they renewed for a year. Hey, we agree that as long as we do the X, Y, Z, you could back out at that point, but it's based on performance and change. And so usually a 2 to a 3-month pilot process with an automatic renewal that they could opt out of if it's not actually being successful. Awesome. Well, we'll wrap up. If you're interested in chatting more, like we can definitely book a call. Would love to talk about something specific to your startup and how we might approach it and give you some ideas on how you can get your first customers. So thank you.